G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day and a fantastic Friday leading into a great weekend. Now today is actually my father's 60th birthday, so happy birthday to old man Willie. Now today we do have a fair bit to talk over, and of course at the end we'll have a look at the maps. But we need to talk over some fighter aircraft, a strike in Kharkiv, some promises from that are arriving in Brussels, as well as rebuilding in the Russian military, and of course some other bits and pieces of attacks that are happening. Now, first off, we're going to talk about what has happened in Kharkiv. Now, for those who have followed me for any amount of time, you'll know that I've actually had a lot to do with Ukrainian firefighters, primarily actually in Kharkiv, as well as purchasing, transporting, delivering chainsaws to frontline stations, as well to make sure that there was no skimming of donated funds, just did it all in-house. That was to Bakhmut, but as well as delivering high-end rescue tools to areas under fire actually in Stepnohursk. Now, if you don't know where Stepnohursk is, it's right in this area around here. We're delivering some tools there. So I have a lot of contacts in the fire brigade, as well as a real soft spot for the great work that they do. And I still maintain all those professional and or private relationships as well. And last night, overnight, Ukraine reported that 20 Shahed drones from Russia were launched towards Kharkiv, with only 11 shot down. Typically, the interception rate is about 90% on those, at least reported from Ukraine. Now, a building was hit, and then once emergency services arrived, a second drone had then hit. It killed 4, 3 of which were firefighters in what many are calling, and it's being reported as a double tapping event. Now we have a little bit of footage of what has happened take place right here. So we see out in here, you can hear then the air raid sirens going, and you will see the flashing blue lights from the fire brigade as well here. And then very clear image of then the strike there, and it had caused significant damage to 2 of the trucks here. This is the one that is the most heavily damaged, as well as an ambulance and some other trucks there too. Now, double tapping, people will say that this is or isn't, but you see there are Russian telegrams saying things like this: Kharkiv tonight flew into the object, and then again it slightly hurt the rescuers. And as well, I'm always shocked for just humanity when it's either this or on a Ukraine channel, whatever channel, when terrible things like this happen and people just laugh, react to it, and see that that is a good thing. Now, double tapping sadly is not an uncommon occurrence in war, and we saw recently an attack on Odessa on March 15th with reports of a double tap by missiles. Now, on the drone too was written this: for Kharkov's city hall. Of course, the massacre that happened in Russia at the event Concert 2. Now, many pages have defended this, saying that it was actually just a coincidence, stating that Shahed drones are pre-programmed to a specific target, that there's no way that they could know where a fire truck could actually be at the time, claiming it was debris that fell from an interception. Now, although this is a possibility, it's also a possibility, and I think more likely, that the pre-programming was set to strike the same area but delayed from the first drone. Both are a possibility, but I think the first is a bit of a stretch. But regardless, first responders should never be targeted, and those in these areas do an amazing job. I spent a lot of time in Kharkiv with the firefighters when Russia was still occupying many areas. Now, I want to just show you a couple of things, because the firefighters were still working behind the line in occupied territory as well. So let's come down into Kharkiv, and of course, everything has been moved back now, so none of this is sensitive. But where I was with one of the military units and then some firefighters as well, staying at the station, but rolled with some of the military units in and around this area, you can see this large intersection then here. Now, at the time, there was some areas you could actually overlook and see then the Russian positions. And in areas out in here where the fire stations are, then the firefighters were still had radio communications with the other fire stations that weren't occupied, and that they were still responding 2 calls, as well as the firefighters in Kharkiv had like RF comms with Russian fighters, and they will tell them to fuck off both ways and whatever. But I just want to show you. So is this major intersection we are talking about, and you'll get a better idea once I come down with my little man somewhere in here. Now, there are some more recent drone photographs taken of some of the damaged buildings in here as well, if this will load for me. So you can see this isn't really the one I wanted, but you can see that there is more drone footage now that has come out and photographs showing some of the damage here. But where I want to move is up onto here to show you sort of what we were looking at. So if we look over, which direction are we? So we're looking this direction, that we could see the Russian lines here. But of course, you're well within range of those communications for the firefighters behind the line, just doing their job regardless of what was going on, responding to attacks. So that is a developing situation. I'm sure more will come on it, but like with everything, it will be pushed one way or the other depending on how people have bias. Now, speaking of more strikes, as I'm filming this, there are reports of major Ukrainian drone attacks into the Morozovsk airbase in the Rostov region. Now, recent satellite imagery has shown that there are 13 Su-34s and 5 Su-35s at this base. Now, there are reports of multiple explosions, but that said, these could be hits or air defense. We know that these air bases are absolutely critical to Russia's war effort and therefore have the most amount of air defense allocation as well. So, as with everything, wait until further footage, photographs come out before people just are making claims all over the place. Now, I just want to have a look at some other little bits and pieces first. Before we have a look at the maps, I just want to go over, we've had more strikes into Kursk as well. So from Ukraine into Russia here, we see, I'm not even 100% sure what this is, and then striking in a residential built-up area here, unsure what was hit. But I have spoken about that I think the potential strategic gain of things going back into Belgorod, Kursk, I think is heavily outweighed by the information propaganda fallout that these strikes are actually having into here as well for the civilian populace there. Now, we'll talk about another attack. This has come out today from the SBU and Kiev Independent, that the security service, the SBU, that says that Russia used cyber attack to target Ukraine's brigade. Now, you remember that there was a strike on an awards ceremony late last year that did kill 19 soldiers. Well, officially said 19 soldiers. And what they're saying is there was reports of reconnaissance drones and air alert that then they were ignored, but that Russian soldiers sent phishing messages to hack into messenger applications. This one is saying Signal. I guess you and I probably use Signal a hell of a lot, encrypted, but if you can get on the inside, then you're on the inside and you can see this. And then they'd use that to then put the target of these missiles on. And Visiuk also announced that it was up to 30 soldiers being killed in the attack, despite official reports that only 19 service members were killed. We don't know. As you know, I don't believe any numbers because I myself have seen firsthand when numbers are shifted around to fit other narratives, but a bit more coming out there. And of course, we know that there's going to be a whole other element to this war that is your online cyber, all of that. Phishing text messages, USBs left on the ground, plugged into computers, all that from simple stuff all the way up to hacking into phone networks, military networks, all of that. Now, last little bit of footage I just want to show you here is this. Now, they are lathing down this mortar shell. And a lot of people are going like, why the hell would you be doing this? Well, the West uses 81mm mortars. To throw back to one of the sayings in my unit was, lock up your daughters, here come the mortars, but for mortar platoon. But the Soviets use 82mm mortar, sorry. We use 81. So our rounds could be potentially used in their mortars, and we would not fit our mortar in theirs because it's going to be 1mm. Their mortars won't fit in ours because it'll be 1mm too big. What Ukraine is actually doing here is lathing down 1mm off then these mortars here, so they'll actually fit down the tube of the mortar system. That said, stuffing around with any weapon system always bloody concerns me. But let's have a look over the maps before we talk about then Russia potentially rebuilding a lot of its armed forces. So where we're going to come, so of course this is Ukraine here, the capital of Kyiv. The red area is occupied since 22 and the purple since 2014. Now, one thing I do want to say is Syriac, again, has been multiple days in front of these maps in areas on the Seversk front, Novo-Myalivka, and Robotny as well. So that is very interesting. It's the reason I will continue to use his map, and I think it is very, very reliable. So let's come down in here and we'll just see, then step back a day and forward. Now, we don't see a change in the red, but we can see that there is a change in the grey zone here. So there has been some movement here, some gain of control, some loss of control. So we're not really sure what's happening, but this is in the exact area where Syriac was talking about then yesterday. Now, where we will talk is this Berestov-Spurny front. We have a few different updates here, but I call this then the Seversk front. One of the areas that has been sort of, getting enveloped for well over a year, but has really held on those borders. And I've actually seen Russian pages and Russian command saying that how good the defense actually is in these areas compared to others. But let's have a look here. So this is at Spurny up here. Now, very interesting, the Syriac map on the left. This map actually shows more Ukrainian control than the Ukrainian MOD map, which is very interesting. So we see this building here is this one, and we can line up down here where this road cuts in these buildings. Now, the reason we have these is there's footage come out of shelling into these areas, but Russian shelling into Ukrainian positions. That does confirm that Ukraine is up in these areas. Therefore, there is a correction on Syriac map as well. That video footage showing Russian army shelling Ukrainian positions in Spurny allowed to correct the map. The locality is again under full control of the Ukrainian army. The video is several days old, possibly from the end of March. However, it seemed to corroborate an earlier video from February indicating the gas station and warehouses in the south were recaptured by Ukrainian forces at the time. It is curious to see that Google Maps updated satellite imagery in this direction, showing the degree of destruction the town has suffered in these almost 2 years of positional battles. Now, I'm just going to get up that Google map. I'll be back in a second. So then we have the Google map here, and you can just see the pockmarked earth from the amount of shelling in and around this region of Spurny. And as these maps more and more update, we'll get more idea of what it is rather than purchasing very expensive satellite imagery of some of these areas. But down where we saw this change here, this is one of the other areas where Syriac reported a couple of days ago, but where we have then Noel Reports' map showing a change here as well. So let's just line this up. So this is Belahorivka. Then we have, let's zoom out one. So Belahorivka here, straight up. This is the same area where there is some movement. You can see where this train line runs and out in this direction here. So saying there is more control around here. This lines up close with Syriac rather than the deep state MOD map in this area. So you just can see that Berestov I'm talking is just on, it's underneath this thing, but it's right there. So we're talking this area. So that is interesting. There is some movement up in here. Nothing huge yet. Then we do have another Syriac map update in Berestov here too. So we see Vyemimka up here. This dot is Berestov. Down in here is Vesely. So said that there is some territory gain out. So we can see where this cuts back in to the north. So out in this direction here. It doesn't have all the indicators we would like on a map, but Russian army continued advances northeast of Vesely towards Vyemimka, taking control over a series of trenches and heights. So there is some shifting in and around the Seversk front just to the south of Seversk. Now, where we're going to move is then down into Bakhmut. Now, I don't have a Syriac map update here, but what we do have is a very interesting update on this map into then Chasiv Yar, really reaching the first areas of Chasiv Yar. I reported yesterday that the fight for Chasiv Yar is on, and for me, this confirms that the fight here has begun by this map, entering then the first houses here as well. Then we have the Noel Reports Ukrainian map here, confirming very similarly. So you can see the forest area here, that this is showing basically the exact same movement. Now, something interesting I want to talk about for Chasiv Yar is some of the controlled close air support that is happening here, as well as then the FABs. But just before I get ahead of myself, let's look at Suriak map here. Again, same area being shown between all three maps. Therefore, we will confirm that this movement has then all occurred. The only thing that Suriak does show a bit different is some more control out to the south, but nothing too significant. During the last hours, Russian army managed to recapture the forest belt adjacent to the micro district, reaching the first houses, which are now within the grey zone, and the battle for the city of Chasiv Yar has started. So we know this has been a long time coming, and it has seeming that now it is here. Now, one thing we do know is around Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar, the amount of like your FAB glide bombs that are being dropped 30 to 50 kilometers behind the line by, say, the Su-34 aircraft and coming in is substantial. And this has been one of the big reasons that Russia is able to move. We have had over the past month or so footage coming out of Su-25 aircraft, which are a close air support aircraft, similar, well, very similar to say like an A-10 Warthog in America. I'm sure you're very familiar with, crossing over Bakhmut. But from beyond there, we haven't had really that much, because these ones have seemingly been the ones that come up, they fire the unguided rockets and then turn away. Now, we do have a little bit of footage that's come out. Now, I can't figure out if this is Ukrainian or Russian footage. There's Russian pages sharing it here. Active military operations in Artemovsk, so Bakhmut. Attack of the Russian forces, motorized units, breakthrough a large number of vehicles, blah, blah, blah. So being targeted. So we're looking at Russian vehicles being hit, but I'm not sure whose drone this actually is. But regardless, doesn't matter. What I'm interested in is at the very end of this few-minute video here. I'll put this video on the Telegram if you'd like to watch it. But just here, we see then two Su-25s and then a third cross into frame, and then a fourth cross into frame, and flying over Bakhmut, Chasiv Yar area, and many pages are claiming then they're doing close air support. Now, what this tells us and where the geolocation of this is, so we're talking, this is right where we are at the moment. So see this train line that Russia has moved up to here, so the maps confirm that, but saying that these aeroplanes are operating over that region. Now, I'm not interested in the plane or what's happening there. What I'm interested in is this does show, if this is over that area, a substantial change in the air defense coverage and the air dominance in this region, that instead of firing FABs from kilometers back or tens of kilometers back, or the unguided rockets from kilometers back, that if they're conducting close air support in this area for armoured vehicle movements, not only does it show an increase in combined arms activity, but it also shows that the air movement here has really freed up for Russia, which wouldn't be surprising. We have all the indicators of a lack of air defense by Ukraine, especially the interceptors, and that Russia is having more success with their air assets at the moment. Now, we do have some more areas to look over then on the maps as well. So where we'll come down, of course, into the Avdiivka front. Let's have a look here. The only change we do see is just down near Novelsky. It does look like, according to this map, that Russia did lose some control down here. That said, we don't have another map backing that up, and we do like multiple maps. We don't have any change around Madiinka, although we do know that this push out to Horovka here is pushing very hard to get down there. Now, the change we do see on this map, and this is now lining up with the NOAA reports as somewhat actually, and the Suriak somewhat, is this change in Novomyalivka through these fields. Now, what the other maps are showing differently to this is that this cuts through more like this, showing more control over the town itself. But regardless, this is showing some changes in and around here. Ugledar area, we're not seeing any change. Now, we do have one near Uruzani here. So let's have a look forward, and back and then forward here. There has been a change in the map on this Uruzani front. And of course, this green is counteroffensive areas. This is where we're seeing Russia focus a lot, is trying to get back areas that then were lost in the Ukrainian offensive that took place mid last year. Now, skip through Huliapol, no change. And then we do see another change near Robotny here that we do see. We've seen this grey zone, but then it has been confirmed the grey zone has increased and that Russia has pushed up into this forest belt in Robotny as well. Now, of course, these maps show very different between these areas, depending if you're on the Suryak map and or the Deep State MOD map. But regardless, what we do know is there has been some changes in this region. Now, that will end the mapping for the day, I believe. We've done the maps, we've done the SUs. Now, let's have a look over these Reboot. Now, this is a very interesting part that has really come across. So, Russia has rebuilt its military after suffering enormous losses during the invasion of Ukraine, said a US State Department official. We've assessed over the course of the last couple of months that Russia has almost completely reconstituted militarily. This is from the Deputy Secretary of State, Kurt Campbell. So this is significant. Campbell's assessment seems to contradict those of the Pentagon and America's allies in Europe. Lithuania said that it would be between 5 and 7 years to reconstitute Russian forces for a full-scale war. Now, we have from another source as well reporting on the same thing that he said they've retooled and now poses a threat to Ukraine. You can actually look up what he said. It was in an hour interview. It's on YouTube, but not just to Ukraine. Its newfound capabilities pose a longer-term challenge to stability in Europe and threatens NATO allies. Now, the one thing we'll talk about this first. This came from a source a while back, but even the best case scenario will take time. This wasn't from this is from before, but estimates will go 5 to 10 years based on how sanctions affect them and their ability to put technology back together. So this is what people are saying, that it's 10 years before Russia could rebuild, and then this bloke has come out and basically said that Russia has retooled and reconstituted militarily and ready to go and now poses a threat to then other countries in Europe and NATO. Now, one thing I will say is potentially this is propaganda as well, or he's speaking out of line of the narrative. So it could be true. We don't know. It does seem on the front line that Russia has reconstituted a hell of a lot of its troops, of its armor, of its planes. We are seeing that. We know that there has been an improvement there. But one thing I will say is it is in the interest of certain officials to say, well, look, Russia is really retooled, therefore we need to send all this into Ukraine. We see that with like the ISW do that as well. So there could be some propaganda pushing on here too, because I think the negative or the backfire propaganda that's occurred in Ukraine has been Russia's defeated, got no tanks, got no men, got no missiles, and then people go, well, why are we still sending stuff? We can back off on sending stuff. And now, because that whole shifted, people are going, what the fuck is going on? That if you make out like it's a stronger enemy, you may get more in. Does that make sense? Anyway, for Rebuild, someone I know, incredibly intelligent, sends me some fantastic stuff, has then talked about this. Incidentally, I think you're very right to call attention to Russia's adaptation and innovation. People spend a lot of time discussing what potential Wunderwaffen, so wonder weapon, the Ukrainians might get, because there are a bunch of systems in NATO countries that Ukraine doesn't have, but often completely neglect potential Russian developments. They have a lot of science and technology graduates, engineers, researchers, a big military industrial complex, and a large budget to work with, especially now the military budget up to like 6% GDP, billions and billions more dollars going in. Fabs were bound to happen. And I also knew they'd come up with cheap cruise missiles based on similar principles. That is the, I can't remember the acronym, but the Fab just with like the turbojet engine on it. So drop that cost of something like a Kaliber down massively. There's almost certainly way more in Russian labs. People should give more thought to what that might be and how much of it they'll make, how expensive it will be, etc. So responding to future threats, not just current threats. Like we spoke about yesterday, that it seems like you're always behind the 8 ball, as officers were saying, that it comes too late. I suspect the way people underestimate Russian capabilities in R&D has much to do with how much behind they are in semiconductors. But they can make 90, I don't know what the NM stands for here, but chips themselves, and import 14 NM chips or better from China. 90 NM was state-of-the-art in 2003. Did American weapons suck in 2003? No. Look at the cruise missiles, look at the F-22, look at things like that. Add this to the list of semiconductor processors typically don't make it into weapons until several years later after introduction to PCs. And now you see how silly the notion that Russia can't produce anything new and sophisticated because of sanctions really is. And I think that is one of the problems we've had with propaganda, is saying that they can't produce anything, but we're still seeing it pumped onto the front line, as well as we know there's a military-industrial complex that is huge there, and support from outside countries going in also. And I'm sorry, but the sanctions, you're never just going to sanction everything to be able to get in, because countries just won't see those sanctions, or it's impossible to actually do. Now, we have a couple of videos from the Foreign Minister, of course, Dmytro Kuleba, as well as the German Minister here about Patriot Systems that we'll listen to.
We have just concluded
this is in Brussels.
A meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council, where I urged allies to provide Ukraine immediately with more air defense.
So we saw Kuleba, who's on the right here, posting on Twitter saying, like, there's all these Patriot systems around the world. We're the only ones getting attacked by ballistic missiles. All of them should go into Ukraine.
Systems, specifically Patriots, capable of intercepting ballistic missiles. And I appreciate the response from the allies, in particular the response from Germany.
Yeah, we heard loud and clear what the foreign minister said, and I also would like to underline, we see what's happening in Ukraine, realizing that you need this air defense now, because it's now that schools children really have to be in safety, that in Odessa the port has to be protected. We as Germany are co-chairing.
And it's not just, I'm sorry, but this is a war. It's not just, you lean on heartstrings of school children have to be protected, and the port in Odessa. Well, yes, of course, I agree with both, but you have to protect military installations as well. You can't just say this is the only reason for air defense. No, you need to defend things that are strategically important to the war. So let's be honest about this, is to protect Ukrainian assets to fight the war and to have an economy, which is in Odessa, and then to protect civilians in cities, of course. But you can't ever forget that other one as well.
The capabilities coalition. So
you can't just say that every missile that's gone in is targeting a school or a hospital. They don't have tactical strategic worth as far for it does, like hitting a school does nothing for the front line. Yeah. Okay.
After the strong call of the Ukrainian foreign minister, we will call in Europe again that everybody has to check where their air defense is, what they can provide for Ukraine, but also have this pledge worldwide, arrange the funding, because we definitely know every day, every month counts. And it's not only words, it's action, what matters now for you.
Looking for countries to look at where is your air defense, what is it doing, and can it go into Ukraine? And I'm sure they'll find some systems somewhere. That said, there's still going to be a massive gap for an amount of time coming. We don't know how long that will be until that will either get plugged, or we don't know how it will look if it doesn't either. Now, so this is Antony Blinken from the US, Sec of State, with Kuleba. Again, he's had a couple of big days.
The determination of every country represented here at NATO remains rock solid. We will do everything that we can, allies will do everything that they can to ensure that Ukraine has what it needs to continue to deal with Russia's ongoing aggression.
So, sort of, but it's still held up in the House. We don't know where that money is coming. Some will say potentially the April 9th date given is going to be pushed back potentially weeks as well.
Against Ukraine, an aggression that gets worse with every passing day. Ukraine will become a member of NATO. Our purpose at the summit is to help build a bridge to that membership.
So to reiterate, saying Ukraine will become a member of NATO. We know that there are a number of reasons that Ukraine will want to be part of NATO, as well as there are a number of hurdles Ukraine needs to jump over to join NATO. The biggest one being is the ongoing war. Now, many will say you can join NATO while there's a war, whatever. Ukraine is not going to join NATO while there is a war on. I'm sorry, that's just not happening. That is the main hurdle, as well as there's a number of other hurdles to go over as well. And we don't know where this war is going to end yet. We do not know what capacity Ukraine is going to be after the war. Maybe great. They've got Crimea, got Donetsk, got Luhansk. All's good going, but we don't know how it's going to look yet. No one has a crystal ball of how the war is actually going to look after. And of course, all the NATO countries need to vote on this with veto. They can veto as well for Ukraine to actually join. We know down the line, most likely, and I believe Ukraine will become part of NATO, but not until the war is over. And we know that there are many years to come of that.
To create a clear pathway for Ukraine moving forward.
But, of course, we believe that Ukraine deserves to be a member of NATO and that this should happen sooner rather than later.
So, of course, there are a lot of benefits to being part of NATO, but at the same time, until the war's over, very little odds that Ukraine will actually join NATO. People grab onto this as we're joining. No, there are steps put forward of where to get there, as well as the EU membership of you need to reach this goal, this goal, this goal to get in. And one of the big ones for a lot of that is going to be, of course, for EU things, economic and corruption, and in the courts as well, and problems there. And of course, NATO is going to be security and military. Just not sure how this is going to look afterwards. Legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day and you're going to have a great weekend. I should speak to you tomorrow, but things may change. Look after yourself. I'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.